I'm Anynewprovince, and is this possibly Pauper Playable? That's the question I want to answer about the Survivor cycle. These cards were printed in Hour of Devastation. My video series wasn't around during the release of Hour of Devastation, so I've gone back to highlight these cards before Masters 25 cards come out next week. Before I get into the deck, I just want to remind you can like the video or subscribe to the channel down below. I'd seriously appreciate it. It's a great way to let me know you've enjoyed everything, and it really encourages me to keep making great Pauper content. Today I'm going to tell you about some of the shells that I tried out the Cycling Matters creatures in, and then I'll break down the deck I decided on for this week. I like to call it Cycle Survive. The cards I wanted to build around this week were Cunning Survivor, which is 1 and a blue for a 1/3, and it says, whenever you cycle or discard a card, Cunning Survivor gets +1/+0 until end of turn and can't be blocked this turn. I also wanted to try out Grisly Survivor, which is 2 and a black for a 2/3, and says, whenever you cycle or discard a card, Grisly Survivor gets +2/+0 until end of turn. I wanted to build around these cards because there are a lot of mechanics at common that want you to discard cards as part of their cost or allow you to discard cards as part of the effect. Grisly Survivor will get pumped every time, so quickly it'll get up to 20 and we'll be able to swing at our opponent for lethal almost out of nowhere. It helps that its partner Cunning Survivor has built-in evasion. We can keep pecking in at our opponent for as long as the game goes on, so long as we can discard cards. My first idea was some kind of combo kill deck. It was a Golgari shell that used Rites of Spring, which says discard any number of cards, search your library for up to that many basic land cards, reveal those cards, and then put them into your hand. Shuffle your library. I wanted to use Rites of Spring to discard our whole hand, draw that many lands out of our deck, and then pitch them to Wild Mongrel before swinging with the Grisly Survivor for the win. The advantage of the Golgari shell was that it could also run Slaughterhorn, which has the ability Blood Rush. Pay 1 green, discard Slaughterhorn, target attacking creature gets +3/+2 until end of turn. This is a +5 for Grisly Survivor. It takes a lot less cards to get it to 20 if Slaughterhorn can be one of the cards you're discarding to it. The next shell I tried was Rakdos with Scorchwalker. It has a Blood Rush ability like Slaughterhorn, but this one pumps for a little bit more. That cut down the number of cards we needed to combo off by a lot, and red also gave us access to Rummage abilities. Like the green shell, this version didn't offer enough payoffs for discard, and that's why I eventually ended up abandoning those decks. I had almost given up until I actually tried out the Dimir version with Cunning Survivor and a bit more repeatable discard. It turns out that if you can get in enough damage with a single big discard turn, pecking in with some evasion is actually effective enough to close out the game. And that's how I ended up with this deck, Cycle Survive. I'm going to tell you about the non-survivor threats in this deck first. This is Heckmaw Sentinels. It costs 2 and a blue for a 2/3, and it says, whenever you cycle or discard a card, Heckmaw Sentinels gets +1/+1 until end of turn. I have this card split with Grisly Survivor because against some spells you really do want to pump toughness instead of just pumping power all the time. Next is Gurmag Angler, which costs 6 and a black, it's a 5/5, and it has Delve, which means each card you exile from your graveyard while casting this spell pays for 1 generic mana. Gurmag Angler is a contingency for Affinity. There aren't many other ways for this deck to deal with it, and Gurmag Angler certainly gets in the way. If we're not playing Affinity, then once we've got a board under control, Gurmag Angler gets in there and closes out the game just as fast as one of our discard combo creatures. Another reason I thought this strategy could be viable is because there are cards at common that you can discard for free. Well, not all of them are entirely free. They usually do come along with a worthwhile effect. First, we have Faerie McCobb, which costs 1 black. It's a 2/2 flyer, and it says discard Faerie McCobb, exile up to 2 target cards from graveyards. A little bit of incidental graveyard hate on an evasive attacker that pumps all of our other attackers. This sounds like a pretty good inclusion here. Next, we have Street Wraith, which costs 3 black. It's a 3/4. It has Swamp Walk, which is relevant for decks that play swamps, and it has cycling, pay 2 life. That means we can discard Street Wraith at instant speed to draw another card, maybe find another discard spell and continue to combo off, while at the same time being a kind of decent late game threat, especially if your opponent runs swamps. The next efficient self-discard spell we have is Careful Study. It costs 1 blue and says draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards. While it's not quite as good as Faithless Looting, I'm still glad to have this here to enable an explosive turn. These next cards are our repeatable source of discard. First, we have Soratami Cloudskater. It costs 1 and a blue, it's a 1/1 flyer, and it says pay 2, return a land you control to its owner's hand, draw a card, and then discard a card. While this seems like sort of expensive card filtering, it does synergize really well with the rest of our deck, and I like that it can still peck in for damage so long as it isn't removed. Next, we have Raven's Crime, which costs 1 black, and it says target player discards a card. It has Retrace, which says you may cast this card from your graveyard by discarding a land card in addition to paying its other costs. That means we can get a discard trigger from a card in our graveyard, a card we've already cast. That'll give us repeated pump effects for our Cunning Survivors and Grisly Survivors, and it may actually pick some stuff out of our opponent's hand that can make a combo turn go awry in combat. This last set of interactive spells is selected to synergize with our deck while controlling the board so that we can keep pecking in with our pumped up threats. First we have Chainer's Edict. It costs 1 and a black and it says target player sacrifices a creature. You can cast it again out of your graveyard by exiling it and paying 5 black. Next is Doomblade, which is a little light on this synergy, but you cannot play this color without including it. Doomblade costs 1 and a black and it just says destroy target non-black creature. This next card is really hard to evaluate, and I'm kind of still having trouble with it in the final build. Ickerslick costs 2 and a black. It says target creature gets -3/-3 until end of turn. It has cycling 2, which means you can pay 2, discard it, and draw another card, and it has Madness for 3 and a black, which means when you discard it, usually from cycling it, you can exile it and then cast it from the exiled zone by paying that Madness cost 3 and a black. It's a 2-for-1, but it's a little bit slow, and it's not a super effective removal spell. I'm not sure if it's completely worth it, but I figure a deck that could potentially be weak definitely needs some 2-for-1s to make it there. Finally, we have a little counterspell package because we can't deal with certain permanents once they hit the battlefield. First, we have Miscalculation, which costs 1 and a blue. It says counter target spell unless its controller pays 2, and it has cycling 2, which is good because it gets worse as the game goes on. We have Countervailing Wins as kind of our 4th copy of Miscalculation with just a little bit more versatility. Countervailing Wins costs 2 and a blue, and it says counter target spell unless its controller pays 1 for each card in your graveyard. It also has cycling 2. We're pretty good at stocking our graveyard, so long as our opponent can't deal with that, this should be a pretty effective counterspell. Okay, let's have a look at this mana base. First we have Radiant Fountain, which says when Radiant Fountain enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life. It only adds colorless mana. This is good for recurring with our Storatomi Cloudskater. Hopefully, that little bit of incidental life gain will get us out from under hyper-aggressive and burn decks. We also have 2 Bazooka Bogs, which enter the battlefield tapped, but when they enter the battlefield, we can exile all cards from target player's graveyard, probably our opponents. Bazooka Bog can also be recurred with Storatomi Cloudskater, and it might give us an advantage against Tron decks or just decks that run Mystical Teachings or Forbidden Alchemy in general. We're running 4 Ash Barrens, which have basic land cycling 1, which means you can pay 1 and discard it to search your library for a basic land card. I like Ash Barrens here because it's another discard enabler while it fixes our 2-color mana base. We're running 3 Dimir Aqueducts. We want to bounce lands back to our hand so that we can pitch them to Raven's Crime for its retrace cost. We have 3 Dismal Backwaters. They're just standard pauper duels. They enter the battlefield tapped, gain us 1 life, and when they become untapped, they add a blue or a black. We're running 4 Islands and 4 Swamps, 4 basics of each because we want to hit an untapped island early and we want to hit 2 untapped swamps late. Okay, let's have a look at this sideboard. First we have Dispel, just a little bit more of an efficient counterspell than when we have main deck. We have 4 Hydroblasts for beating those fast red decks. We have 2 Aura Fluxes. Aura Fluxes are great if our opponent wants to boggle or heroic up a single creature. We have 1 more Doomblade, just another unconditional removal effect if we're in a creature heavy matchup. We have an Echoing Decay if our opponent's just playing tons of creatures with the same name or if they're flooding the board with tokens. We have 2 Shrivels if our opponent's on all X1s, maybe there's some elves running around. We have 2 Duresses because, like I said, we're not super good at dealing with certain permanents once they're already on the battlefield, and we have 2 Nihil Spell Bombs to go along with our incidental graveyard hate in the main deck. And there you have it, Cycle Survive. We're going to be taking this deck live into a league at twitch.tv/Anynewprovince on Tuesday night. We're there every Tuesday night playing Possibly Pauper Playable decks. Before I go, I just want to remind you that you can like the video or subscribe to the channel down below. I'd seriously appreciate it. It's a great way to let me know that you're enjoying everything, and it really encourages me to keep making great Pauper content. I hope you enjoyed this deck tech, and hopefully I'll see you on Tuesday night.